What's up, you guys? It's Jackson here. So when you get onto iRacing, one of the first things you learn is about safety rating and how important it is to grow a good safety rating and maintain that so that you can progress through the licenses, so that you can race Rev It cars and series you want. Now, I see a lot of complaints on the forums and around the place, YouTube, about how the safety rating system works, and particularly with new drivers complaining that someone crashes into me, I lose rating, and that's why I can't progress to the next license level. How's that fair? Well, today we're going to go over 6 tips that you can use to grow your safety rating to an A 4.99 level and maintain it. Alright, so let's jump straight in. Point number 1, and that is finish every race. So sometimes you're going to have a bad race, right? That's just the deal with racing. Even the pros have bad races. Maybe you'll be making a whole lot of mistakes, you're inconsistent, you're way down the back, maybe you have a crash and you have 15 minutes of repairs, okay? My advice is finish every race, even if that means sitting in the pits for 20 minutes and then you go out and you finish the last couple laps. Now, to understand the reason for this, we need to understand how safety rating works. So that number you see on your license, like A 3.25 or D 2.5, whatever, and that's based on something called CPI, which is corners per instant, which is pretty much what it sounds like. The number of corners you drive divided by the number of incidents you receive. So maybe you go 50 corners for every incident, maybe you go 10 corners for every incident, maybe you go 200 corners for every incident. The more corners you get per incident, the higher your safety rating will be, right? So if you have a crash, let's say lap 5, so you do 5 laps, you have a crash and you go, I'm done, I'm out, I quit. Okay, let's say the track has 15 corners, you've done 60 corners, and maybe you got 4 incident points, okay? So your corners per incident is 15. Now, if you drive the car around to the pits, take the repairs, and get out, and maybe you finish another 5 laps, okay? So now you've done 10 laps for those 4 incident points. Your corners per incident is now almost 40. So you've gone from 15 to almost 40, 35 or 40, somewhere around there, right? So you see how that is improving your safety rating just by finishing a bad race, and how you probably get a bit of an iRating gain by doing that as well, because other cars are going to crash, you're going to keep going and finish, and so it's just a win. If you've committed to doing a race, that's 40-minute race, you're committed to doing a 40-minute race, even if you crash, just say, okay, I'm going to finish the race, I'll go to the toilet, have a drink, whatever, I'll come back and I'll finish the last 10 minutes of the race, okay? Now, tip number 2, to grow and maintain an A 4.99 safety rating, and I shouldn't need to say this one, practice.
We talking about practice.
Just practice, but don't practice aimlessly, right? Fill the car up with the amount of fuel you need for either the full race or to get to the first pit stop, and just run down the now this will have a number of effects. So obviously it's going to help you learn the track, learn the car, and get comfortable driving around the track, obviously, okay? Second of all, as the fuel load burns down, you're going to get faster and faster, and so that's going to be rewarding. It's going to help you to find speed, and that in general is just a good thing. Third of all, when you go, okay, I'm going to go out there and I'm just going to run this fuel load down, it helps you to take practice a little bit more seriously, and you don't just go hammer and tongs straight out the gate, crash, reset, go, crash, reset, go, but instead you go, okay, I'm treating this more like a race. Yeah, I'm going to push the limits, yeah, I'm going to try and find the limits, but I'm going to go out there, I'm going to run this whole fuel load down, so I'm committing to driving for 30 minutes maybe, and then that's going to really help you to get in the mindset, the same mindset that you'll be in when you're racing. Now, tip number 3 to grow your safety rating is related to the second tip, and that is when you're practicing, test track limits. So if you've been around, if you've driven on a bunch of different racetracks on iRacing, you'll probably have noticed that track limits are not exactly consistent from track to track. Traditionally, a track like Spa has been really, really strict on track limits. A track like Le Mans, it's almost impossible to get off track. So what you should do when you're out there practicing is just be testing the track limits. Run the car over this curve. Do you get an instant point or not? Now, the reason I say this is because The primary number of incident points you get is through off tracks, which are generally caused by yourself. Okay, so knowing exactly where track limits are enables you to push up to that limit during the race and not go over it. Now sometimes in a race you're going to go, man, I just need to send it and I'm going to use up an incident point. That's fine, but if you do that every lap, obviously that's going to cost you a lot of safety rating and maybe even get you disqualified. So during practice, just test those track limits, understand where they are at each corner, and that way when it comes to racing, you'll be better prepared than everyone else and you'll be able to get the fewest off-track incident points. So tip number 4 to go on a 4.99 safety rating is to review every car contact after the race. So let's say you have a crash with somebody, you go on, you finish the race, and then at the end you go back and you look at your replay and you go, okay, what happened here? Now, the really important part here is to come at every incident with the lens of what could I have done differently. Now maybe someone absolutely drilled you from behind and it was totally their fault, but still try and come at it from the view of what could I have done differently in this situation, because what you'll typically find is 90% of the time there is something you could have done differently. That doesn't mean the crash was your fault predominantly, but there's still a way you could have avoided that incident if that's what you really want to do. Now sometimes this is really hard to do. Okay, I get it, the red mist descends, you're super annoyed at what's happened in the race. So one piece of advice is to save the replay and then come back to it later that day or maybe the next day or a couple of days later once you've cooled down and you've got a cool head and you can just look at the incident objectively. Have a look at what you could have done better. Now if you really want, record the incident, post it on Facebook or post it on the iRacing forums, and people will happily drill you if they think you've done something poorly. Just ask that advice and don't get defensive when people give it to you. Now the 5th tip for growing your safety rating is to try racing in longer races. So rather than racing in the 12, 15, 20 minute races, try 30, 40, 60 minute races. Now this has 2 effects. First of all, the longer race, it spreads the field out a bit more. Everyone's a little bit more calm in the early laps. You get less of that wheel-to-wheel contact, as well as the field spreading out. And so later on in the race, you might just be by yourself circulating laps. The second point is obviously with a longer race, you're achieving more corners throughout that race. So you're getting more corners per incident, ideally. And typically you'll find in the 12-minute, sprint D-class races, they're pretty full on. There's a fair bit of contact, and it's not always easy to get a clean race. And even if you pick up, 3 off tracks in a 12-minute race, that's going to be quite difficult to gain any significant iRating. Whereas you take that across to a 60-minute race, no doubt you'll drive a little bit more calmly, you'll probably have less contact, maybe you'll pick up 6 incident points for a 60-minute race, and you're going to gain safety rating probably in that situation. Now, if you want to take this a step further, what you can do is join a team and go endurance racing. Now, this is only applicable for C-grade licensed drivers and above, obviously. You can race in VRS Endurance, which is 3-hour events, or Endurance Le Mans Series, which is 6-hour, all the way up to the 24-hour special events. Now, what you're going to find is you're going to be typically doing, 1, 2, 3-hour stints during these races. And you're also going to be driving a little bit more within yourself because the car has to last the entire duration of the race, which means you're going to have less off tracks. Typically all the drivers know that they need to be a little bit more patient, so you've got less car-to-car contact again, and you're driving a whole lot of corners throughout the course of a race, so you should be able to get a decent safety rating gain from doing that as well. Now my final tip to grow to a 4.99 safety rating, and this one is a little bit cheeky, and it's only really applicable for the road license, but it is learn the Nürburgring. Now, hear me out, okay? I realise that especially if you're new to iRacing, learning the Nürburgring is a massive mountain of a task, okay? It sounds extremely difficult, and frankly, when you first try and start learning the Nürburgring, it is. But let me explain why it's super important and a really easy way to grow your safety rating. Because in Nürburgring you have 170 corners, okay? Thereabouts. And it's pretty easy to get around there with only 1, maybe 2 off-tracks a lap. If you're getting 2 off-tracks a lap at the Nürburgring, that's quite a fair bit, but that's still 1 incident per 85 corners. which is the equivalent of 1 per like 6 or 7 or 8 laps on a standard racetrack, which is actually like a very good rate. So if you can go race the Nürburgring, you know, do a 3-lap race and pick up 4 or 5 incident points, you're going to get a massive improvement in your corners per incident. Now obviously learning the Nürburgring is easier said than done, but if you just go out there, spend 30 minutes a day trying to learn the track, once you know it, you pretty much know it. And it becomes a lot of fun to go racing there. You can race a whole bunch of different cars there. You race the Nürburgring Endurance Championship where you get 4-hour races and big safety rating gains if you can avoid crashing with other classes of car, which is much easier said than done. But this is one way that you can actually get really significant safety rating gains. Now, I wouldn't necessarily recommend just focusing on the Nürburgring and forgetting everything else that I've said, because then you're not going to be a safe driver, but you might have a decent rating. But this is a great way to sort of supplement your general racing. And so with that said, you guys, thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, smash that like button to help out with the YouTube algorithm. Also, if I missed any points, you have any other tips for gaining safety rating, drop a comment below, let me know, and I would love to hear your tips for gaining safety rating. That's it from me today. Hit that subscribe button so you get more iRacing tips and full races. Hit the notification bell, and otherwise that's it from me today. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, whatever that looks like for you. Until next time, bye for now.